A player and I are arguing about a homebrew weapon. I know this isn't really an RPG horror story, but I couldn't think of any better people to ask. So my friends and I are running a fun campaign that heavily focuses on homebrew. This, of course, means some of the NPCs use made-up weapons. One of the characters is Indra Sanime, and he wields a large bastard sword called the Wind Cleaver. It is imbued with wind magic that makes it feel almost weightless to the owner, so they can use it just like any other longsword. Important context for this is that Indra is a max-level warrior NPC, and has a weapon and feats to match. One of my players is all bent out of shape because his level 4 Cleric can't have a sword as powerful as his. The kicker is that the character isn't even proficient with a bastard sword. Now, normally I would let him have something like this, but he wants an exact copy of the Wind Cleaver. Anyone have any advice on a compromise? Well, I think it's best to let him know he's making demands of the wrong person. This NPC has the badass magic sword, not you, the DM. If the player wants it from them, let them know that they have to take it from them. Tell them it's not impossible. But as the old DM adage goes,
well, you can certainly try.
My name is Jacob Crowe, and welcome to the Crow's Perch. Chaotic Evil, an alignment typically belonging to villains. Surely you've seen it 1,000 times in D&D memes of alignment charts and all the characters associated with it. Characters like the Joker, Joffrey Baratheon, and of course Jinx from Fortnite. Chaotic Evil is also typically an alignment that isn't chosen by player characters. Why, you may ask? Well, for one, it's that most players are the heroes, and surely a hero wouldn't be chaotic evil. But there is a second reason, and it's that the chaotic evil alignment, much like the lawful good alignment, attracts the worst kind of players. And today, we will be going through an example of such a player. So, without further ado, let's explain to the DM that murdering the entire party is what my character would do, as we gather up a murder, and dive right into this story. Content warning for mentions of sexual assault. Hi everyone, longtime content enjoyer and first-time poster on this subreddit. I've actually been holding on to this story for a while now, partially because I wasn't sure I'd be able to do it justice. There are plenty of little things I'm skipping out on, because they're tiny one-offs, and I don't quite remember them in detail. But here we are, and without further delay, let's introduce our marvelous cast and the horrors they shall face. Names changed for obvious reasons. From the original group, for this near year-and-a-half campaign, we have DM, Gnome Cleric Wizard, Kobold Barbarian, and myself, Aasimar Sorcerer, still playing to this day. We had a Ranger, who was later replaced by Kobold's friend Null, a Null Paladin, and a Druid, who was the GM's significant other. We were a merry band who fought many challenges, like a punk rock band, a Dracolich, organized religion, and a town full of undead. However, the good times were not meant to last forever, as the Druid left abruptly with no explanation, and DM didn't want to go into details about it. We didn't press for information, since it seemed like a touchy topic, so me, Null, Kobold, and Gnome endeavored to adventure out on our own for a time, but it was clear that something was missing from our party dynamic. So we asked DM about maybe getting another fifth, and she mentions a player she was formerly in a game with, who was able to completely break the world as a level 3 warlock, who hasn't been able to find a game recently. We, in our hopeful ignorance, did not see the neon red flag that this was, but rather as a token of how out of the box the player is. It's mulled over a little more before they're added to the campaign's Discord server. Enter that guy, Kitsune Bard. Now, that guy seemed like he meshed well with the group off the bat, engaging himself pretty well with all the talks we had during the off time between sessions. He was playing an illusion and charm-centric bard, which was pretty nice, since we were sorely lacking in manipulative spellcasting. Gnome was more DPS and utility spells, while I had support and buff spells. However, a couple things popped up to me as minor red flags. Number 1 was the fact that he started the game with essentially a centaur slave girl who was bound by magic to follow his orders, while number 2 was him using a homebrew spell, basically bestow curse that you could pick more than one option for, which he used against Kobold because he didn't trust that guy with his life right off the bat. The spell thing wasn't too egregious due to the fact we all had ways of getting modified spells like this, but still, not the greatest first impression. One of the things that guy found out about in character, that my character was a child of a Monitor, and was basically tasked by him to find and restore a long-lost temple. In return, a Monitor would grant him full godhood and restore his love interest NPC, a Deva who was stripped of her powers and memories, and restore her to her power and place in the upper planes. Well, that guy seemed to take special interest in this, both in and out of character. He reached out to me in DMs, saying he talked to the DM, and they agreed that he could become my patron if I didn't want to retire my sorcerer, and tried to convince me to go along with the plan, stating how cool and game-breaking it could be. I declined, and gave my in-character reasoning, stating how the only reason he wouldn't want to ascend to godhood is the fact that he isn't leaving much behind. But the pros definitely outweigh the cons in that regard. This then changes to him saying, "DM said it was cool, so you have no choice. We're doing this." Which I firmly told him no, and unless the DM explicitly told me this was how things were gonna go down, I wasn't doing it. He then actually stopped for a while, and we talked nuances about his character. Mostly just him going, "I'm so epic and cool, and even the gods fear me," and then me just smiling and nodding. Until he brought up the Deva NPC, and my character, stating he wants to corrupt my sorcerer to have a god in his pocket, and get under the NPC's skin and break her. To which I promptly responded by noping out of that conversation quick. Newest red flag, and first indication of that guy's hate boner for the Deva. Well, the deals thing came up at some point in game as well. Not directed at me, but at Null, and I think Kobold. However, memory fails me. And the group ruled no deals with party members, since they seemed actively designed to flock over the one signing said deal. Afterwards, he and Gnome went after the corrupt Pope of Lathander's church, who was holding Gnome's sister hostage. The two were able to save Gnome's sister, but not before that guy could make a deal with her dying soul and steal it. This prompted Gnome to flip out and absolutely annihilate him in combat. However, this is not the end of our tale, because that guy apologized for discrediting Gnome's entire arc, and DM prompted for a do-over, where in this new timeline, they captured the Pope, and that guy stole his soul instead. The pair made their way out to the rest of the party, who were taking on the punk rock band mentioned earlier, not long after he had revealed himself as not a kitsune, but actually a demon disguised as a kitsune, and was based off a bit of a certain radio-themed demon from Hazbin Hotel, and tried to kill a demigod child so he could become king of the demons, or something. I don't know. This was then interrupted by Lathander nuking his holy city because his religion became way too human supremacy, and the shockwaves were felt all over the continent. We were on the other side of the continent at the time. Anyways, we all head back to our home base, and we start Gnome's plan of building a city to serve as a safe haven for the non-human races running from Lathander's now nuked religion. That guy and I go into the forest to see how preparations are going with the orcs and kobolds who are now there, getting the early stages in. And of course, the forest is on fire due to the earlier nuking. One of the kobolds, an artificer, had created a device to put the fires out, so I stayed behind to use it with my ability to fly and get at the hard-to-reach fires, while that guy went to appraise the party of the situation and get our Warren's key, which basically allows for door-to-door transportation 5 times a day. Well, that guy got very distracted with me and Gnome not at our base of operations, and saw fit to go well beyond antagonistic mode and cross into some not pleasant territory. First things first, he tries to convince Noel's mom to let him into their room while impersonating Gnome. Given how he had previously stated the only reason Noel wouldn't make a deal with him is because her parents were still alive, made this pretty concerning. Let me stop the video for a second to remind you of the content warning at the beginning of this story, as unfortunately, it's going to come up. Now, let's get back to the story. More worrying, he later spots the Deva NPC avoiding him, and decides it's a fun idea to pin her to a wall and try to have his way with her. This was met with a swift casting of the banishment spell, which he failed the save against. NPC then, understandably, hides and locks the door. Once that guy comes out of banishment, he decides to be very vocal about knowing where she sleeps, right as the session ended. I hopped off as soon as that session ended to collect myself, as I am actually a victim of sexual assault myself, and that ending scene was actually quite triggering for me. Once I had regained some level of composure, I reached out to the DM to let them know that that sort of behavior makes me feel extremely uncomfortable, and she agreed that it was flocked, and she would speak to him. I also talked to Gnome to appraise him of what happened, since he and Noel had left the session early. He brought me into a group chat with Kobold, and they both agreed that his behavior was getting worse, even after apparent talks with him, Gnome, and DM, where that guy promised to do better. We then brought this to the DM, who then got Noel up to speed, and we all voted to see if we wanted to keep that guy or kick him to the curb. And in an unsurprising twist, the vote was to unanimously kick him. DM then asked why didn't we bring up some of the smaller issues earlier, like when he bragged about how fun it was, absolutely obliterating someone's homebrew setting in just the first session, and that he wanted to do it again. We told her that we were under the impression that the two of them were friends, and had some form of history, so we wanted to give him a chance, for her sake. Well, apparently she had only met him in that campaign, and they didn't talk much other than that. After he got booted, the DM wanted to make sure he'd be gone, so Tiamat herself showed up and kidnapped his ass. But we weren't horribly bothered by it, though we did try to fight her off and actually almost won, which is still wild to me. We got a new player in not too long afterwards, an elf astrologer, and it has worked out so much better in the months of play since. Noel and Kobold even got to retire and start up new characters, and I'm not too far behind them. TLDR. Random that guy tries to make himself the antagonist by seeing how many lines he can cross before he gets kicked. Wow. Before the end there, I thought that guy just needed a little bit of course correction. But apparently, the man needed a damn exorcism. Consent. It's really, really important, and not just in TTRPGs. And that guy seemed to completely disregard the consent of both the player and the DM playing as the NPC Deva. What he did was inexcusable. It doesn't matter if it's a pretend character. You still tried to rope him, bro. The fuck is wrong with you? Also, if a player goes about bragging about how they destroyed a campaign, that is not a badge of honor on their sleeve. That is a red flag. As for the DM of this story, sometimes it's hard, catching on to all of the vibes going on, while also making sure everyone is having fun at the table. But I'm gonna chastise you here, and remind you that it was your job. You are the mediator, you are the host, and in this case, you really needed to act sooner and pick up on what that guy was doing. So there's my little peck on the wrist, DM. But at the end of the day, I'm glad you kicked them out. So, that's it for today's stories, and these are my thoughts, and I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about today's stories in the comments down below. As for Art of the Week this week, today is voting day for the Edgelord Challenge, where I asked viewers to depict the Crowe and one of their characters as edgelords. We have quite a few good submissions so far, and I'm gonna post on the Discord so that voting can get underway as soon as possible. The winner will be announced next video and be featured in a community post. But to whet your appetite for art for now, this lovely set of dice was sent to me by StudioHexe at StudioHexe.com, based in Seattle. This may or may not be a teaser for an upcoming giveaway, I don't know. But in the meantime, be sure to check them out. Their stock's a bit limited at the moment, but they should be coming out with some new dice soon. And before we end today's video, I would like to thank the Crow's Perch patrons. In a previous poll, I had you decide on which character I'd be playing in the upcoming Dice Goblins collaboration game. Figured I might as well do their voices from last to first. Sorry, Scold. Maybe next time.
The first of our patrons is our Birb Reuven Gritters.
Why don't you hold up and let me handle the counts of Quills? Like Gibber-Woods, King Drazil, Christian Pipp, Cosmosis, Kooky Spooks, Rykis, Vincent, Thompson, Zerofang, and Netscape Navigator. But we can't end the video without talking about the Barons of Beaks, like Jester King, Gintahl, Misfit, Wormy, Mulqueeny, Den of the Drake, McYeetly, and Anja.
And at last, at their rightful place at the top, the Dukes of Feathers, like Rogue the Cleric, Henna, Staniel Das Boot, General Constantine Chase, Happy Rex, Stevie, Doc Salty 96, and of course my esteemed colleague, Acroth.
Thank you for supporting the channel, and if you'd like to become a patron yourself, feel free to click the link in my description down below and follow it to the Crow's Perch Patreon. And be sure to like this video if you enjoyed today's story, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, as it's been growing insanely fast. And with all of that out of the way, I will see you next time as the crow flies.